Hey folks, today we are taking advantage of this wonderful window lighting to talk about 2 quick tips to approach the transfer application process. I know this is coming at a poor time considering the applications are due for this cycle here in about a week, but the hope is that maybe 2 weeks from now, somebody who's in the next cycle sees this and has an entire year to let this stew. So the first thing we're going to talk about today is how you should absolutely ignore the admissions rate. When you look at Stanford's transfer admissions rate and see that it's pretty low, it's not as if they're just putting all these applications in a hat and just pulling one out. That is about as useful as that statistic is for you. You can't possibly quantify your odds. So when you go onto a forum and you have people chance you, the only thing you're doing is either crushing or validating a very shallow sense of self-worth. And it has nearly no grounding in terms of reality. So ignore the acceptance rate. If you feel like a school is a good fit, then apply. Don't let the small percentage of admits steer you away. There's a lot more that we could talk about this, but generally speaking, you can't look at that singular number and use that to chance yourself of getting in. Of course, if there's less seats, there are less chances for you to get in, but the number itself doesn't really matter that much. You don't have a 1% chance of getting in. You could have a much greater or a much lower, and it's kind of inherently unquantifiable considering the fact that there are so many things that go into play. So much of it is luck, and that's okay. An example of this is when I looked at my FERPA documents for my Stanford readers. I used a lot of self-deprecating and dark humor in my essay. One of my readers thought it was great. They said that they loved my sense of humor. They thought that I had a great understanding of who I was and seemed like I had a lot to offer. My other reader said that Joel appears to be angsty and doesn't seem very happy. So you can't win everybody over. And that's just so much of it, once again, is luck. If I had one other reader who didn't like my sense of humor, then I very well could have not gotten in. There's no way to try to drum up a percentage chance of admit, especially as a non-traditional student. Which takes us into our second point, or second tip, which is about this thing that you always hear. It's about being authentic in your writing. And I think that is obviously great advice, and I tell people to do that all the time. But the question is always, like, how do I tell if my writing is actually authentic? How do I know if this is really me? And obviously, you can kind of guess, or as your intuition is probably leading you to believe, it is very difficult. It is extremely, extremely difficult to hone an authentic voice in your writing. And you have to pass through a lot of different stages in order for you to feel confident that, yes, indeed, this is an authentic form of my voice. When there is this inherent power dynamic between you as the applicant who is requesting to come into an institution and these gatekeepers of the institution looking at your, essentially your plea into entering these wonderful, illustrious pearly gates that Stanford guards so closely, you can't help but feel there is this sort of tone of formality, or, I mean, honestly, in some cases, like supplication to some degree when you write. So I think that because this is such a complicated thing to do, and it is so difficult to actually find a way of determining whether or not you're being authentic, I think that a very good first step, if no matter where you are in this process, is asking yourself, am I changing the content of what I say? Am I changing the way that I talk about that content with this imaginary, fictitious sort of admissions reader in mind? Am I writing for that person, or am I writing for me? And if you're finding yourself like adjusting the way that and of course this doesn't apply in the sense that like casual conversation, the way that you speak is different than the way that you write. So obviously it's going to be more formal in your writing, but if you're changing the fundamental way that you speak about things and not in a simply writing versus spoken formality change, or if you are apprehensive about speaking about certain things because you're afraid of potentially, polarizing a reader against you, you should really take that into consideration, because that is a great indicator that you might be not expressing your truest self. You might be adjusting and attenuating your personality in order to be less risky, to be less polarizing, to be less, stand out in the wrong way. There's probably a term for that I can't think of right now, but that is normally a good indicator, just period, that you are not being authentic, that there is something that you're changing about the way that you're presenting yourself because of this power dynamic essentially between the readers and you. So if you're noticing that you're doing that, take a step back and ask yourself if it's really worth trying to become this sort of vanilla version of yourself that might not be as appealing as the true, insert your Ben and Jerry's flavor here. So once again, that is not an end-all be-all solution. That is not the cure-all. That's not a panacea. You're in the position where you have to write these extremely difficult self-appraisals in a very strange sort of self-selly, pitchy kind of way. It's not easy, and it won't ever get easy. But at least you can use that tip, that small test, to help you inform your own understanding of whether or not you're being authentic. And of course, there's more to it, and that's for another later video. But to quickly recap, 1, don't get thrown off by the admit rate percentages. It doesn't actually mean anything. It means something in a very sort of basic statistical sense, but it doesn't mean anything to you as an individual applicant. It would be a category error to try to rate yourself and your chances strictly off of that statistic alone. There's a lot of other things to take into consideration, and of course it does mean something, like there are less seats available, but that doesn't mean that you have a 1% chance or a 4% chance or a 20% chance of getting in, because you're either gonna get in, you're gonna get waitlisted, or you're gonna get rejected. There's only 3 outcomes, and to try to come up with like the statistical distribution of, or the probabilistic distribution of either of those 3 buckets, fool's errand. Don't even try. And then if you're worried about being authentic, read your writing, ask yourself, am I changing this? Am I changing the way that I present myself with somebody else in mind? And if the answer is yes, dive in a little bit, investigate it, and hopefully you can come to a conclusion on whether or not you're being authentic. That's really all we have for today. There's obviously more work to be done. If you're applying to this cycle, good luck, because luck's hugely important. And if you're not applying this cycle, stop by the office hours. I'll be releasing more content, hopefully more regularly. And I wish you guys the best of luck, and have a great day.